Joined now by a very special guest as we're going to talk some Tennessee football newcomers. And Josh Ward joins us now of the Sports Animal. You can listen to him noon to 3 right there in Knoxville, and he streams like crazy. He's got a great newsletter, so check it out, Josh_Ward. Josh, how are you, sir?
I'm good, guys. Good to be with you.
So it's good. It's good to have you. We always enjoy the Thursday conversation with Josh. So, Josh, it's 420 Day and it's National High Five Day. So you are more likely by the end of this week to get high or give a high five.
Well, I have a 1-year-old that has still a select number of skills. One of those is to high five. So I've already handed out a number of high fives today.
It's morning even.
Yeah, the 3-year-old needs some high fives to maybe get himself going. He's not necessarily a morning person quite yet. So I dish out a lot of high fives, some booms, but more high fives, fist pounds.
I'm not a high five guy. Maybe that's the kids grow up thing. I'm a fist bump guy at the gym because I don't want you to talk to me because I have my headphones on. I'm working.
Yeah, David Putty and I would have gotten along really well because he really appreciated a high five, especially if he was working out a great deal at the dealership.
Hey, why can't a dip be a meal? Things like that bug me. Everything about things like that.
Gotta support the team. Yeah, David Putty is one of the great thinkers of our time, if you ask me.
Yes.
Seinfeld fans, I think, would agree.
I gotta go. When I get back, we'll make out. All right, here we go.
Seinfeld character. Which episode was that? And how much Seinfeld?
I was just watching it the other day. That's the next thing you got, Josh. When they get a little bit older, you expose your kids to Seinfeld and some of the things you liked as an adult, which that's super cool.
Oh, yeah. Part of my plan has been to just raise them as if they are. I was born in '85, so just raise them like they were born when I was. So in 5 years, they're going to learn about this brand new band called Pearl Jam, and they're going to be very excited about it.
My son is a huge Zeppelin fan.
There you go.
As a matter of fact, I can hear him driving up the driveway, and he's blasting Zeppelin. I'm like, that's a good kid. Okay. All right, let's get rolling here. You wrote a story based off spring camp with some of the top newcomers that had come in. It's kind of funny. We look back at last year and we thought Justin Williams-Thomas would be a breakout guy, and that didn't work out. So we are clearly speculating, but with at least spring, we know a little bit more. And then everybody wants to ask about Nico. So you were at the orange and white game. Your impressions of what Nico did in a very limited role.
Well, he walked onto the field at the sound of a loud roar from the fans. Fans were very excited to see Nico out there in a Tennessee uniform, even if it was just a spring game. And the quarterback position is an attraction for Tennessee. There's no doubt. The fans are excited about what both guys can do, Joe Milton and Nico. But they've seen Joe. There's more intrigue with what Nico is, what he can become as Tennessee's quarterback. So watching him play, it's a spring game, and there was always the qualifier, but there was no qualifier to his rollout throw down the right sideline to Ethan Davis. That is an example of why Nico is so highly regarded as a quarterback. He has a skill set that most quarterbacks in his class do not possess. He has a lot to learn, which Nico has talked about and Josh Heupel has talked about, but he has a lot to work with as he is learning Tennessee's offense and understanding what Josh Heupel is expecting. Another thing that I think we learned over the last few weeks, and part of it was expected going in, is that Joe Milton is still the starter. Joe Milton is the guy. There's competition in terms of guys go out there on the field and compete, but there is not competition to be the quarterback starter. The starter is Joe Milton, which everybody in that building recognizes, including Nico, who talked about Joe being somebody that has helped Nico learn. And Joe talked about 2 years ago when he arrived at Tennessee, he didn't understand all the plays. He's trying to learn quickly. Now he's a guy that he understands what the coaches expect, and he can explain to Nico and Gaston Moore and Navy Schuler, the other quarterbacks that he mentioned, when they have questions for him. So I think we've learned that Joe is QB1 and Nico is a very talented but young QB2.
Josh, I like to think I'm tight end. I like to think you're tied in as well. I think we both are. I go back to the CBS report of whispers that Nico's not living up to the hype. And tell me if you have gotten one inclination from anybody you've talked to within Tennessee's program that that's the case? Because I've gotten a big goose egg 0.
No one has whispered, shouted,
Whisper.
mimed anything negative about Nico as a quarterback, as a highly touted player on campus at Tennessee. It's been quite the opposite, that Tennessee coaches have seen him and said, yeah, that evaluation, pretty good in terms of what his talent is. And then also, a lot of people are really impressed with how Nico has asked questions, how he has worked, how he has been in the facility, trying to understand and grow as a quarterback. So I've not heard anything even close to what was written about whispers questioning if Nico is worth it. And you can always debate worth if you want to, if dollars are included. And that was part of the point there. I found it notable that a few weeks later, a different writer at CBS Sports said there needs to be more talk about how impressive Nico is on the field because there's been too much NIL conversation and not enough talk about what kind of talent and player he is. So I think Tennessee is very happy with Nico while keeping first-year expectations reserved, but excited about what he can become in the future. Also recognizing that Nico could be needed. That's just the position. A lot of quarterbacks went down in the SEC last season, including at Tennessee. So Nico has to be ready because at some point this year, he could be needed. But assuming nothing physically happens to Joe Milton between now and September 2nd when Tennessee plays Virginia, Joe Milton will start at quarterback for Tennessee.
We're being a little veiled. CBS Sports, it was Dennis Dodd who said the
Right.
whispers at Nico. And was it Barrett Lee that said?
No, it was a different writer whose name I recognize, but it escapes me right now. But I've read a number of times, well versed in the world of college football, and that was within the last 2 weeks. It was a leading up to the spring game type column. But yeah, it was Dennis Dodd who wrote about the whispers questioning if Nico was worth it, and I just have no idea why Dennis Dodd wrote that or where he could have possibly come up with that information.
Yeah, but Barrett loved Butch Jones more than Butch Jones' own parents, so I always take that with a grain of salt.
Well, now Barrett, he's a weekly guest on my radio show. I love Barrett. He's a Braves fan too, so you know that he's a high quality person. He I think had Tennessee and the quarterback position as something to watch for the spring. So Tennessee's gotten a lot of CBS Sports coverage. I'll tell you that.
Go, Caleb. Sorry to go so long.
No, it's fine. I've read a lot of Barrett's salary too. I always thought he. I look at writers and I see who they favor and who they don't. I always thought Barrett was one of the ones who really actually kind of favored Tennessee. He seemed like but it's good for CBS if Tennessee's good. So, I mean,
he would love Butch Jones. How many times did he say that he'd win the SEC championship there on your program, Josh? I counted 18.
Well, I've had 3 kids since that would have been a possibility. So my memory is. It's all over the place. I got some cobwebs to undo on that.
He loves Butch Jones like Barrett Lee. Go ahead,
Josh, wanted to stick with the backfield and newcomers in the backfield. You know, we heard a lot of talk about Cam Seldon moving to running back in the spring. After seeing him play the spring game and seeing Deshaun Bishop, but then knowing Jabari Small, Jalen Wright, and Dylan Sampson were held out, does him playing the spring game, is that a sign that he's not going to play that much in the fall? Because didn't it seem like Josh Heupel use his running backs and receivers, like the ones he doesn't care about getting hurt are the ones he trotted out there in this game?
Like Kirsten Biggers.
Yeah. That's a funny point. The veteran guys who are injured, banged up, whatever, they're going to be held out, and then the young guys get their first opportunity. But I don't know that that's the case because I think there are a few freshmen, a few newcomers that Tennessee believes will be able to play right away and make an impact. And I think Seldon is on that list. I think Arion Carter on defense at linebacker is on that list. You have to be careful whenever the conversation of freshmen come up because it's easy to be excited about them when they arrive on campus and are going through spring with veterans out, which allows the newcomers to get those needed reps. But I think Seldon is different. I think he's a guy that physically matches the highly touted evaluation that accompanied his name in recruiting. He is a big guy that can run, and he's versatile with his skill set as he can run with the football. He can be a receiver. The question during recruiting was whether Seldon would play wide receiver or running back. And I think Josh Heupel is smart enough to figure out ways to use his skill set in both ways as a runner and receiver. So how big is his role right away? I don't know because I am confident that Jalen Wright and Jabari Small are going to be heavily involved right away this upcoming season. But that's also a position where you need to have 3 or 4 guys that you can count on. And Tennessee was pretty fortunate last year because they had a lack of depth, but I think they also had to count on those guys to run banged up during the season because of the lack of bodies. Remember, they brought in Lynn J. Dixon last August in a somewhat desperate move. I say that because they just didn't have many players. Lynette Whitehead had gone down. Lynn J. Dixon was available because he had transferred to West Virginia, then was not at West Virginia, so they brought him in. He lasted a few practices and was gone. That tells you where the numbers were. I think they're in a better position. Deshaun Bishop would be a guy where I think they're legitimately impressed with what he's done this spring. Expecting that he plays a role right away would be unfair. But at some point during his time at Tennessee, I think Deshaun Bishop will factor into Tennessee's offense too. Selden has a better chance to factor in more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, Bishop was at Carnes 4 months ago. That is a heck of a transition. We had a couple
Maybe I just say this real quick. Sorry, since you brought up Lynn J. Dixon, I'm sorry, but we know if you're not talented enough at West Virginia, you're not talented enough for Tennessee. But if your all-field issues keep you out of West Virginia, your all-field issues will keep you out of any place in the country. Like, they take anybody.
He was
and
for burning
that
couches.
Yeah, that proved to be the case, I think, in just a matter of days.
Yeah.
Elijah Herring somebody asked a question about Elijah Herring. He would not be on the upper crust of guys that I've heard about that could make an impact this fall, but he's kind of that second tier.
Yeah, he's a guy that is kind of like a rocket in the way that he plays. He is one of those whoa boy players in the way that he likes to fire off, and I think that showed a little bit last year in some of the playing time that he received. So at linebacker, the conversation starts with Aaron Beasley. He really developed last season and looks so good in the Orange Bowl for Tennessee and is a leader for the Vols on that side of the ball. He's an older guy. Keenan Peely coming in as a transfer from BYU is going to factor in there at linebacker too. He's an older guy that can kind of help lead that group even as a newcomer. But then I think you have Elijah Herring as a player to talk about. Caleb Perry is a second-year guy that I do think they like his potential. And then I mentioned Arion Carter. He's a guy that looks like he's been in college for more than just a couple of months. And he was highly touted as a recruit from Smyrna. Arion Carter is a guy that 2 years ago would have signed with Alabama. And it came down to Tennessee and Alabama in this recruiting cycle. But Tennessee's program is in a different position than it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Tennessee loses Arion Carter to Alabama. 2 years later, because of the development of the program and what the Vols are able to sell, they beat out Alabama to get Arion Carter. And that could make a difference in what Tennessee's defense is. The defense still has a lot to prove, but compared to where the defense was personnel-wise 2 years ago when Josh Heupel arrived, I think they are much happier with the amount of talent they have, the depth of it, which creates more competition on the field, which should get them ready for September. So that doesn't mean all of a sudden this is a top 3 defense in the SEC, but I think at every level they have more speed, more athleticism, which creates more competition that the best teams just have to have if they're going to go up against the best teams like Alabama and Georgia and you know who else in the SEC. So Carter at linebacker helps with that. And your original question was about Elijah Herring. I think they like him a lot too and what he can be.
Yeah, I hear that Carter's upside is really, really high. Nathan Leacock, your thoughts there? Again, kind of that second tier type of guy that probably needs a little time to develop is what I hear. How about you?
Yeah, same. They like his talent. He was evaluated as not a high-level wide receiver from his junior year heading into his senior season, and then his recruiting rankings rose because he continued to develop as a prospect. And by the time he was signing with or enrolling at Tennessee for the spring semester, he looked like a high-level receiver from the rankings. On3 had put him in the top 50 overall in the country. So last spring, when Tennessee was landing Nathan Leacock and was being compared to somebody like Carnell Tate, it's like, man, we got to get Tate, or I guess we can get Nathan Leacock. This would just be the general thought if you look at rankings. Well, by the end of the cycle, that's flipped almost. So at the wide receiver position, they've not rotated a lot the last couple of years, and the 4 guys who didn't play in the spring game, back to Caleb's point earlier, would be the 4 guys you expect to play when they actually start the season. Caleb Webb showed with his catch down the right sideline and then touchdown that he has some upside to try to work with. Behind the scenes, Tennessee says a lot of good things about Chaz Nimrod, and then you have Nathan Leacock as a true freshman who is talented but has a lot to learn. it's not a deep room in terms of the amount of players, but over the last couple of years, they haven't played a lot of guys. At the beginning of last season, we weren't seeing a lot of Ramel Keaton until Cedric Tillman went down. But I think Tennessee legitimately likes all 7 guys in that room at receiver. And then again, somebody like Cameron Seldon can factor in. The tight ends will factor into this conversation in the passing game. So Tennessee is fine personnel-wise. And in the future, I think Nathan Laycock is going to make an impact on Tennessee's offense.